The initial epicenter of coronavirus, China, is starting to see a decline in new cases and deaths, at least according to them. That country has been ravaged by the virus with over 80,000 cases and 3,000 deaths.
Coronavirus has particularly impacted China's migrant community, a group who make up roughly half of the country's population. The epidemic has exposed a long-growing tension in the region. The Chinese economic boom would not be possible without political repression and a permanent migrant underclass. Joining us via Skype to elaborate on this is Dexter Roberts. He's the author of The Myth of Chinese Capitalism, and he joins us now via Skype. Dexter, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Dexter, what are some of the things that you uncovered in your book? Of course, in D.C., people like to talk about the Chinese economic miracle, but you talk about how there may be a little bit more of an unsavory tale to that miracle. Let's go into that.
Yeah, well, some of the myths I deal with in my book. One is that China is on this continuing trajectory of rapid growth, and that it will continue to be a global growth driver for companies and for countries around the world. And what I look at, as you mentioned in my book, is at, for lack of a better word, the other China, which is about half the population when you look at migrant workers and their cousins in the countryside. And the fact is, they are treated as second-class citizens, and China can't keep growing the way it has as long as it continues to treat them that way.
What is a day in the life of one of these migrant workers like?
Well, things have changed obviously recently with the coronavirus. At this point, they're hiding out in their homes. They can't get back to their jobs in the cities, whether that be in factories or restaurants in the service industry. Before the coronavirus, a day in the life would mean spending long hours working in a factory, often an export factory, perhaps making the iPhones or the clothes that we wear, or perhaps in a restaurant as a service worker. So it was long hours, relatively low pay, although it's grown in recent years, and often being separated from the rest of their family. So migrant parents often will only see their children once a year who are back in the countryside.
Wow.
So Dexter, just tell us generally more about the Chinese economy and how it's structured in terms of competing with America, because there's often this, basically what we talk about here on the show a lot is that one of the things is that American companies have basically turned a blind eye to how much cheaper it is to produce goods in China, but you lay out some of the cost that actually comes with that.
Yeah, well, the model that they've relied on for years now is factory to the world, basically focusing on the fact that wages have been cheap. They've been an export producer for the world, as we all know. And that model actually is not working anymore. Wages have gone up. China now, your average manufacturing worker is actually more expensive than Malaysia or one in Mexico. So that model doesn't work anymore. That model has been very beneficial for the multinationals of the world that have been able to make cheap products there and sell them around the world. China's trying to shift now to a much more consumer-driven economy and also a service economy. They want to continue to make goods, but do much higher value goods. And so this is the shift that they're dealing with right now.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit more about the coronavirus impact. What do we know about the impact on the Chinese economy, and is this in any way a threat to the hold-on power of the Chinese Communist Party?
So I would say it puts tremendous pressure on the Communist Party now that they weren't dealing with before. As we've started to see in the cities in China, to a degree, life is returning to normalcy for your urban residents. They're starting to go back to work. Those that aren't going into the office, white-collar workers can still work from home remotely. But that's a very different story in the countryside. So those migrant workers that I was just describing, most of them have been unable to return to the cities, to return to the factories or the construction sites or the restaurants that they have worked in. They are not earning money, therefore. When they've tried to return, in some cases, they've been driven out of the apartments that they've rented. There's this fear by city residents that they will have the virus. So that whole half of the population is facing tremendous pressure right now, and they were already they were already aware of their second-class status, and I would say the coronavirus is really bringing that home to them even more so right now.
Mm-hmm. And so what are the Chinese going to be able to do to get out of this situation? Are they, I've read some reports that they're doing bailouts or doing back pay or many of these other things. Is that just apply to to the white collar workers, or does it apply to these migrant factory workers as well?
So you have to keep in mind that the trend has been towards trying to basically, these people have been leaving the factories already because of rising wages. This is something the Chinese government has actually encouraged. They have a policy of providing subsidies to factories that replace workers with robots or automate. So the Chinese government knows that the wages have gone up. They would like these factory workers to go back to their villages and figure out how to support themselves in some new way, some new unspecified way. So most of the efforts to stimulate the economy we've seen have been more infrastructure spending, loans for small businesses and others at low cost to try to help them through this tough period. We've seen much less focused on actually trying to help the migrant worker population.
Very interesting stuff, Dexter. Thank you so much. Great to have you.
Thanks, Dexter.
And we'll have more for you after this.